Always that never gets old. Yeah, I definitely rejoice for my salvation. My salvation story is quite long, so I'll do my best to keep it as brief as possible. But I was a young child, about 4 years old, when my parents actually heard the word in a town called Squamish, about an hour or so, hour and a half outside of Vancouver. And at the time, just explain this at that time, we were only aware of one other soul who had been saved in Vancouver. Had heard the word from a couple who was visiting from Australia at the time in Vancouver, and long story short, through some connections with my uncle and this one brother who had been saved, my mom and my father had heard the word. My aunt as well at that time too, all living in Squamish. And a few years later, another family got saved and heard the word and received the Spirit, and then another family after that as well too. During that time, there was brothers who were coming across from Australia to come and support the souls that were there. There's just a few of us, and I was just, as I referred to my son as a little rat bag, I was a little rat bag running around back then, causing all kinds of problems and havoc. A common story that my dad used to always mention is him and another brother at the time, right in the middle of a word, a communion service. Even they get up, and we used to have meetings in an apartment in North Vancouver, and they'd get up right in the middle. They'd only been saved for a short time, and light up a cigarette on the patio while there's a meeting going on with the door wide open, smoke billowing through. Those were the early days, and that's the amazing thing about the Spirit. Not long after of these people being filled with the Spirit, the Lord removed those things from their lives. And as a young child, this is what I witnessed. I witnessed my father and my mother smoking 2 to 3 packs of cigarettes a day, to throwing them in the bin, and not smoking, not drinking, not swearing, not partaking in these things. I witnessed amazing healings. There was a man, our dear brother Victor Taka. His family had gotten saved, and not long after he had been filled with the Spirit, and his wife and his 2 children, when they were young, he had cancer, and he was on his deathbed. And the Lord raised them up and healed them of cancer. And these are the experiences at a young child. You're hearing and witnessing these things. I got to the point where I couldn't deny it for even myself. And about 8 years old when I started to take things seriously a little bit. It's still a fairly young age, but again, the simplicity of the word and the simplicity of the salvation message that even a young child, as we know, can understand. And that's my experience. I was a young child. I knew that I wasn't right with God. I was a sinner. As young as I was, that affected my heart. And in humility and repentance, I poured my heart out to the Lord, and He filled me with the Spirit, and I spoke in tongues. And I was baptized by full immersion of water, as the word clearly outlines and explains. I had no problems with it as young as I was. The God that I read of and witnessed in the lives of those around me confirmed His word time and time again. And so there was no arguing coming from myself. And again, as young as I was, the Lord started to see those things happening in my life. And I went through school just like every other child. I had all the same challenges and struggles. I wasn't anything special. I was Spirit-filled, but nothing was different. I still had to deal with the pressures and the challenges of life as a child growing up in the school system. But the difference was, and what I learned pretty quickly, is I had an answer. And I learned and come to know and trust that God was my answer in everything. And in the at the time, what might have seemed to be small things in my life going through school, I went to the Lord, and He answered that prayer, and He met the needs, whatever they were. And I grew up and got to a point where
went through a challenging time in my life, around about the age of 18 or 19. I can't remember exactly when it was, where my family had decided not to continue for themselves and the Lord anymore. And I had my mother and my father. I had three sisters. We had a surprise little brother when I was 18. I always wanted a little brother, but not when I was 18. That wasn't what I was expecting. But a little brother at that time, and I had an aunt and uncle and a grandma who was all saved. And that one day they weren't there anymore. And that had a huge impact on my life. And again, the reality is, and the reality was, just even the things that I had gone through, maybe they weren't as big or seem as trivial. The answer was still the same, and I found my encouragement and my confidence and strength in the Lord, and He got me through that. I met my wife, Jess, in England. She was part of the assembly in Bristol at the time, and we met at one of our camps in Vancouver. And 3 years later, we got married, and we had our own children, and like I said, rat bags running around. And again, another challenge. As I often consider my salvation testimony, and I step through the different aspects of my life, from receiving the Spirit and going through school and getting a job, getting married, having children. It's all the same experiences that we hear of those around us. But again, the one constant that was always there was the Lord, and He was always the answer, my rock. And as I'd come to know and learn to build my life upon that foundation, no matter what came upon me in my life, I was unmovable through Him, and that's been a huge strength and testament to myself, and given me the confidence and the ability to have faith and trust in my God, who still to this day has never failed or ceased to meet whatever need that comes upon us. And just one quick story that happened with Micah. I think he was about 5, and we used to have our camps down in Ocean Shores, just a few hours south, out Aberdeen, past Seattle, on the coast. And traveling to the States from Canada, health coverage is not something that's often part of our plans, especially when you're only coming down for a few weeks. He was riding his bike, and he wiped out on his bike, and I have learned to try and stay calm in those situations as much as possible. Children often react to the reaction of the parents, so I witnessed this happen. It happened in front of a bunch of people on a dirt road in a campground. Wiped out on his bike, and as I'm walking over, he's on the ground, and I could see his knee, was not right. It was sideways. His whole kneecap had shifted around. But I didn't want to let what I saw with my eyes affect what I knew the Lord could do and was going to do at that time. And so I quickly sort of shoved it away and thought, I honestly sort of thought, gee, you're just imagining things. That's not, because the wipeout wasn't that bad. And Pastor Ben happened to be across the path, so I just picked him up, and we laid hands on him as the word instructs to do, and again prayed the prayer of faith, and we closed our eyes, and when I opened my eyes, his knee was right back in perfect position, and there was nothing wrong with it. And there was a few others who had witnessed it, and there was another brother who was standing by, and he came up to me after, and he looks at me with this ghost look on his face, and I'm like, what happened? He's like, did you see his knee? I was like, yeah, you saw that too? He's like, yeah. And so I knew that the Lord had worked an amazing miracle at that time, and Micah milked it a little bit. I had to make a crutch. I got a stick, and I whittled a crutch, and he got to walk around with a crutch, but he was completely healed. And just a wonderful testament to the power of the Lord in my life. And those are just a few of the stories that the Lord has done in my life, and I rejoice every day of the Lord being in my life, and I look forward to the continued blessing, and of course for His return.
Amen.